Topic number 4, we go back to Nick for the final topic.
Colin, this is a topic that's right up your alley, to use a sports metaphor. Or maybe it's not a sports metaphor, depending on this topic. What makes a sport a sport? Is bowling a sport?
That might be my favorite topic intro of all time. That was the first. I'm so upset that Greg wasn't here to see the first time ever that one of Nick's fucking, falling forwards things worked.
It went down real fast,
but you got
and then got it right back up.
Oh, that was so good.
This is something that we've talked about pretty
on Gamescast,
on Gamescast and on Colin and Greg Live about specifically in relation to esports and how I just hate that term. I hate it. It's not to disparage again the people that play those things or do that. I just hate that it's esports. I just don't like that. It's competitive gaming. That's great. It's hard. It takes skill. Congratulations if you do it. I'm happy for you. I have no problem with that. A lot of people look at the definition of sports, and I don't even want to look at it because that's not really what we're talking about. Like what the definition of sports. Of course, chess is considered a sport by the Olympic Committee, for instance.
By the way, at the end of this, I just want to rattle off as many sports as I can think of. It'll probably only be 3, and I want you to tell me whether or not they're sports.
Okay.
At the end.
That's fine. So to me, and I don't know if you guys agree. Like I just think that the term sport is used too loosely. I think that there are certain prerequisites for sports, and if something's not considered a sport, it's not at all an insult to that activity. It just means that it's not a sport, And I just think sometimes, in this day and age, it's like, well, I'm sorry, I knocked your knee there. I think sometimes like the word literally is a good example, right? Yeah. Literally means something, and it was used wrong for so long. Now that the dictionary reflects the totally wrong usage of the word. Now literally doesn't mean literal anymore. It doesn't, Yeah. Like they had changed that, and that really bothers me. So I want to get back to a point where words mean something, and to me, sport needs to be recalibrated in order to reflect the realities of what I think a sport is, which is it's a competition. Mm-hmm. There's a winner and a loser. Mm-hmm. So that's obviously something that exists in esports. That's something that exists in anything. Bowling, you were talking about before. Right. But then it's something that I think has to be athletic. And this is where things get murky. This is where things get murky, because this is the example I'll use. Do I think bowling is a sport? No. I don't.
But there's an amount of athleticism and coordination required to be a top bowler.
There's no doubt about that. Bowling is tough. People that are good at bowling. First of all, I love to bowl. It's a great thing.
I like the activity.
I consider it.
We should go bowling one of these days.
We absolutely should. I love to bowl. I love to bowl.
Kind of funny bowling day.
The last time I went bowling was with Craig Baradon. It was like a long time ago. It was a lot of fun. This is the thing I'll say about that, right? Because everyone's like, well, it takes it certainly takes coordination. The way your wrist moves, your approach, the ball you're using, the way the lanes wax. There's a lot of different kinds of things permutations. Mm-hmm. I'll say that to that though. A chef that can cut an onion really quickly is using dexterity and skill and hand motions and all sorts of things too. Is cooking a sport?
It can be if you make it competitive, like Top Chef.
Sure.
Or Iron Chef.
Sure, but that's where it's a competition. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it can't be based just on a dexterous movement or just on a physical skill, Because
Yes.
a chef isn't an athlete, and neither is a bowler,
Right.
That's not to say, like, bowling's not worth doing. It's not to say that if you're if you bowl and you're good at it, more power to you, That's great. It's in other words, again, it's to say, like, what does the word mean?
So competitive dancer.
Dancing. Yeah, I would have to say that. Dancing probably is a sport.
But see, that's the one I think that people don't ever call a sport. Like when you think you think you can dance or celebrity dance off or what's the other one?
You're just saying things now.
I'm just talking about
America's Next Best Dance Crew.
Yeah. When you talk about that, you talk about like dance competitions. They just consider themselves dancers. They don't consider themselves. And then there's maybe they would say, "Well, I'm an athlete," but not to that degree, because I think dancing is considered in its own category.
Right. It's murky. I don't necessarily have all the answers. Right.
Sure.
What I'm saying is that we have to. I would love to come at some point societally just come to a definition of like, well, I always use the example like the Olympic Committee considers chess a sport.
Right.
And I'm like, as someone who grew up playing chess and played chess competitively for a while in his younger years and really enjoys the game, chess isn't a fucking sport. Are you kidding me? You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing athletic about chess at all.
It's a game.
Unless you're playing like Bullet or Blitz and you're hitting the clock a lot. That's basically it.
Yeah, but you get a little sweat. You build up a little sweat doing that. A little underarm sweat.
I'll tell you a little story. I used to go
little choach sweat.
When I was in high school, I used to go to Washington Square Park in New York City to play chess. I played Blitz.
You did.
Yeah,
you went to New York City Park to play chess.
Yeah. You did that. Like, did you play against Lawrence Fishburne?
No. Oh, you know what?
Surgical Bobby Fischer.
Fucking awesome movie.
Great movie.
Hey Arnold's grandpa.
So I used to go to Washington Square Park and play Blitz. There was a specific variety of chess we played called Blitz. Blitz is 5-minute size. Typically in a standard game, you might have 90 minutes. So this was a way like it's memorization. And I always remember, I'll never forget it as long as I live. My friend was playing this guy and the guy was winning, but his clock was out. But my friend had not realized it. And as long as you don't realize it, like the game doesn't end until you call the person out and be like, you're out, like tip your king over, is over. And I remember calling him out on it. And the guy was probably like 35 or 40 years old, like that serious. He's like, you don't fucking do that. You know, like you don't, like that's not your job to tell him that the clock's out or whatever. I'll never forget that as long as it was a totally ancillary thing. I still remember that like clearly.
You're like this. Horrified. You don't live in the real world, motherfucker.
So yeah, I used to go, but we weren't athletes. I used to play against these like crazy dudes that like were really good at chess, but they weren't athletic, you know? So it's the same thing I was saying about like, well, if dexterity or skills with your hands or whatever, then cooking's a fucking sport.
Well, so
you know,
that's
that's where I think like it's just not it takes more than common sense. It takes parameters. You know, and I don't know.
But you're bringing the athlete thing into it.
Sure.
Like, does it need to be though?
I think. Well, that's my personal definition of sport is something that is athletic. And maybe we need it. Maybe we need a definition for athletic because again,
yeah, I was gonna say, is there a threshold of athleticism that we would say, like for instance, now I'm gonna name a few things for you.
Okay.
Lacrosse.
Yeah, absolutely. Lacrosse is a sport.
Hockey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shuffleboard.
No.
Curling.
No. Like
curling takes a physical amount of agility to do. You got to skate sideways. You got to use that.
They're not skating first
that
of all.
heavy brush.
They're not.
Oh, like they have shoes on.
Yeah. So and again, it's not that I love
Best sport on the planet.
Curling's fucking awesome.
Awesome.
It's a great game.
So excited for the Winter Olympics.
I wonder.
I'm not going to watch them.
Oh, I love Winter Olympics 2018. I think that right.
I don't know.
Didn't Olympic hockey just happened? I think it is
whenever they changed so that they weren't on the same year. Because remember that time they were like, we got to do something about the Olympics. They've been every 4 years. Is just people forget about them. Yeah, so they changed it every other 2 years. I don't know. To me,
I think summer
they could be on right now.
I think summer's next. Winter Olympics are definitely not happening right now.
I only know from the Mario and Sonic games.
I think that the definition to me, in my personal opinion, is that it's something, and this is such a, it must take like, athleticism is something that you know what it means. Are you breaking a sweat? Are you working really hard? Like, so maybe curling's one of those things that are up in the air. But to me, something like, darts is a good example. Like darts are considered, billiards are considered sports. But I mean, like, they're really not. They're games. And it doesn't diminish what they are. They're fucking fantastic games that take an incredible amount of skill. But athleticism and skill are not the same thing. Because you know what else takes skill? Like winning a spelling bee. Or, like something, you know what I mean? It's like, so we're playing a video
what are
game.
other words then that these things could fall into? Competition?
Game? Yeah. Games, yeah. Like darts and billiards and stuff. Great game. Fantastic, classic games. Just like poker. A game.
That's a perfect example because they call poker a sport. And it is not. I would say it's not.
Done.
It's
not.
It's a card game. Like what I think becomes is the murky territory is you start using the word sport to encompass any sort of competition, period. Right? And that's it's hard to fathom that. It's hard to understand that because to me a card game is a game. It's a competitive game. It is a competitive activity. To me, I don't think of it as a sport. But I'm sure people who win millions of dollars at the World Poker Championships every year would probably be like, fuck you, it's a sport because there's an intense amount of mental aspect to the game and a physicality to it of having to basically play for that long. Depending on, I don't know, I'd imagine some of these games go on for hours. Well, with TV and all that stuff. And you're doing it over specific days.
You're just like, you have no idea.
No idea.
Like, I assume they're playing poker for maybe 3 months.
I think, to me, the World Championship of Poker never stops. It is like cricket. It's just a 4 to 5 day thing.
Cricket's a sport.
Is it a sport?
Yeah.
They have tea in the middle of it, though.
Cricket, they do it.
They stop and they have tea.
Hold on. Let's rewind on this a bit. Based on Colin's definition, sport means you're athletic.
Right.
There's no mention of hating on tea, Nick.
I'm not hating on tea. I love tea. My wife will make me an amazing English breakfast and or Earl Grey at the end of the night with a little touch of stevia in it and some half and half. I'm
feeling like an athlete.
Put me to bed. I just ran a marathon.
All right. So let's take
Is marathon running a sport?
League of Legends, right?
Okay.
So League of Legends, you're a competitive player.
Right.
They're practicing for 8 hours a day. And they're doing all this, their dexterity, there's fucking keyboard stuff, and there's all that shit, right?
Yep.
All the arguments that have ever been made.
Yep, absolutely.
You'd argue they're not sports because there's not athleticism.
No, that's not. It's not being.
We
good
had
at
a treadmill.
Yes, then it's probably a sport.
Okay.
No, I think, and again,
As long as you have to develop your quads, I think it's a sport. That's my definition of a sport. If you need overdeveloped quads to do this activity, it's a sport.
It's just the thing I'm saying is that, and we've talked about this, depending on the shows you've listened to. So I'm sorry if this is a retread for you. I do apologize. Please forgive me for that. But if you're good at Dota or you're good at League of Legends or whatever, or Call of Duty, like that's fantastic. That's a skill, and you should. These guys make a lot of money, and more power to them. It's great. I have no problem with it. In fact, I was one of the great staunch defenders in games media of being like when Colin Coward and all those guys at ESPN were really giving some people shit for for broadcasting the stuff and the League of Legends tournaments or the Dota tournaments or whatever, and they were really being disparaging about those people. I'm like, that's fucking wrong, and that's inappropriate. These people are competing just like anyone else, and it's great, and it takes a lot of skill and a lot of talent and a lot of hard work. But a lot of things take a lot of hard work. You can't, judge something just based on like, look how quickly their fingers move, or look at I'm like, that's not really the dexterity we're talking about when it comes to sports.
Yeah.
A sport is putting on a pair of skates and grabbing a stick and a rubber disc and fucking putting it in a net, and having a bunch of other people try to kill you while you do it. That's a sport. And an example of what I think is a sport, as opposed to something like golf, which is a great game. I'm fucking awful at golf. Golf's a great game, but you're not doing anything for the most for the most of the time, and then you sit and you use great amount of skill to get the ball into the cup, right? And get the ball into the hole, and that's a great skill, and it's awesome. And I watch golf. I enjoy it. So I'm just saying there needs to be a difference between just because you're outside or you're like doing something with a stick, or like it doesn't necessarily mean.
So like you're out there playing cornhole. Is that the name of that game?
Cornhole is not a sport.
Well, here's the question: Is there a one-person sport? Because it sounds like you're saying
Sure.
golf and bowling and all this stuff.
Tennis, I think would probably be a sport. But again,
Gotcha.
like tennis.
But is there a one-person sport?
Oh, you mean like golf? Like golf, you just play. You're still playing against other
I
people.
guess you are playing against other
Yeah,
people.
I mean, golf's a
no, but I
competitive
mean
thing.
like a more like asymmetrical thing.
Gymnastics. Like when you're at the Olympics or whatever, I think that's absolutely
You're
a
still
sport.
competing against
No,
other
but here's the
people.
thing: is that a sport or are they just athletes?
I
Are they
think
just
gymnastics
athletes
is
playing a game?
Well, like isn't that the horse or whatever?
Lars
Is probably a type of sport. The rings and all. I consider. I mean, those guys are crazy athletic. That's the next level between what I'm differentiating between. I still think cooking's such a great example, and like just being really proficient in the kitchen. That's a great skill, being able to chop and dice and cut and figure all those things out. It takes a lot of dexterity, a lot of memory, a lot of
a lot of computations having your
exactly. But I'm like, that's not a sport. And so like, how is it any different than some of these other things we're talking about? Again, it's just about having definitions. It's not about saying that this thing's better than this and therefore this thing's a sport and this isn't. Because again, chess is a great example. I fucking love chess more than anything, like in terms of games, right? Like in terms of video games or anything. Like I love chess. But the Olympic Committee calling it a sport is fucking insane. It is not. It takes not 1 ounce of athleticism, to play, and not even dexterity. Even if you move really glacially, as long as you're playing the game adequately and with standard timing, it's not going to really matter.
I love the term glacially.
Glacial movement.
You're moving at the pace and speed of a glacier. All right.
So what is a sport? I think this answer is this is a question that's different for everybody. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It really just comes back to me when we were talking about exclusivity and all these kinds of things.
Sure.
These words must mean something.
Yeah.
And
Art,
they just don't.
love,
But see, I feel like that's the
sports.
problem is when in order to sort of be open-minded, I feel like that kind of goes kind of hand in hand with being a little bit on the PC side, being like, oh, I'm open to the idea of esports being sports. Let's call everything a sport because we can't. If we define one as a sport, not the other, then we're being discriminatory, right? And so with esports, I would actually argue that maybe it is more of a sport than something like chess because it does take a certain amount of dexterity and there's a lot of computations happening in your brain at the same time. You're managing a lot more aspects of it, and some of them are team sports as well. So there's that level of coordination that comes into it. Like when you have a team and they're working together toward a competitive goal. Sure, it's a game, but if the only thing missing from that is the physicality of it, then it's hard not to argue that it's a sport. Whereas chess, I don't even know how chess works, truth be told. I don't even think it's real. Up until you just said it, I didn't think it was a real game.
Oh, that's interesting. Chess is. You don't know how to play?
No, I know how to play chess. I'm terrible at it, though. I'm terrible at anything that has to do with strategy. That's why I can never beat XCOM. Fucking love that game, but I got to a certain point, I was like, I can't do it. I couldn't. That's why it's hilarious that like you track back through the ages of me being alive, and I do mean ages. And I'm like, I never played WoW. And everyone's like, why didn't you ever play WoW? WoW's awesome. And I'm like, because I could never succeed at World of Warcraft. Like the OG, like WoW 2 or World of Warcraft 2, was it? Or Warcraft 2.
Warcraft,
Warcraft,
yeah.
not World of
Gotcha.
Warcraft.
But not at all like the
No,
like,
I know that, but because I got my ass kicked every time I played Warcraft 2 against Ryan Creasy online, he'd be like, "Oh, dude, I beat you again." I'm like, "It's been 5 seconds. Like, how'd you beat me?" Never. I was like, "Fuck Warcraft. Never do." I'm not even gonna see the movie when it comes out.
Good for you, Nick.
The movie comes out, I'm not seeing it.
Tim, where
I'm gonna watch
do
it.
you stand on all this? Is what I'm saying making any sense at all? or is
What
it
you're
kind of
saying makes
sporadic?
sense. I mean, what you're saying makes sense. I think that you adding the athleticism thing is you just kind of defining that with that. And if that's the case, then you're right. But I don't know. Like, I don't know.
Where do you come down?
It comes down
Is
to a
chess a sport?
definition thing. I mean, that's my thing. I think that's a game. Why do I like not a sport? It's a game. But it's like once
Or
it's competitive.
e-sport. Is League of Legends a sport?
I mean, it's an esport. Is an esport a sport? I am not an athlete. I am not a scientist. That is.
I think you're copping out. I
That
think
is
you're copping out because you don't
no.
want the Twitter hate.
Oh, are you kidding me? No. I mean, my thing is, it's like my gut tells me esports are sports.
Yeah.
Just pure, just like based on what I know goes into them, and comparing between athletes like basketball players and that. It's like, all right, same idea of work goes into it.
Right.
It's different things, and one's definitely less like athletic. But I don't think athletic and sports necessarily need to. Because to me, if you would ask me what sports, I would be like, it's a competitive game. So that's my
Yeah, see,
definition.
because
without
I look
thinking
at
about it.
gymnastics, and I've never actually thought of I'm not saying that they are or not, but I've never thought of gymnastics as a sport. I thought of them as gymnastics.
I mean,
Plain and simple.
but that's the thing though.
Pole
like, then
vaulting,
gymnastics,
not a
those
sport
things
to
make
me
it
for some
weird.
reason. I
'cause
don't know why. I just think you're not really competing
But
against. It'd be awesome if
it's
there was
just
multiple
more-
people going at the same time against each other, and they're like one person died because
the
they got a
game
pole right in their-
aspect's gone then.
like larynx.
What do you say?
The game aspect isn't there. So my definition of sports, those wouldn't be sports because gymnastics isn't a game. You get what I'm saying? It's just a competition.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what the fuck it is. But I think you're right in that these are just words.
But it's to say, like with gymnastics, right? If you look at that versus boxing, I would say boxing is a sport. I would think, right?
Absolutely,
But they're both
boxing's a
judged
sport.
by 3 people, and they're both. At the end of the day, you get a score unless you knock the other person out. And with gymnastics, you can get knocked out. Basically the same thing. You know what I mean?
You're
Like,
right.
But,
yeah.
but it's about the physical nature of the game, this undefined thing of the physical nature of what's demanded of you. Because if it's just dexterity and computation and all those things that really matter, and that's why, for instance, League of Legends would be a sport, then craft cocktail bartending is a sport. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what I'm saying. It's like that's why we can't. I'd rather have a narrow view of what it is than a really wide view, and then figure out a way to respectfully categorize everything else as being equal and interesting. Because I think all of this stuff is very interesting, but finding a name or a way to categorize it that treats it with respect. In other words, I think the word sport is put up on this pedestal, and if it's not, so it's like, oh, darts aren't a sport. Fuck you, like.
Right.
You know, I'm really good at darts. And I'm like,
Almost
that's
as if
fantastic.
sports is the pinnacle of what
Right.
any activity can be.
Exactly.
It's an inferior activity unless you call it a sport, and then it warrants me putting copious amounts of time into it.
Exactly. And it's just, exactly. And to me, it's like, no. Like, sport isn't up here. Sport's down here right next to and parallel to pro gaming and parallel to these skill games like billiards and all these kinds of things. It's just that this particular vertical is where like you put your body on the line in some way. And I guess that's kind of like where I stand on that. Like, it's not to say you're gonna get hurt or you're like punching or getting checked or getting hit in football. I'm saying you're putting your body on the line. Running the bases in baseball is way more athletic than cutting an onion. It requires less dexterity. You know what I mean? That's kind of.
Yeah. I guess for my thing is I go in the complete opposite direction of you where you're like, I think sports should just be this narrow thing, whereas I'm like, I don't give it to everything. From now on, sports are the whatever's competitive. Like, that's what makes it a sport. So it's like, yeah, darts is, so is games, so is this, so is fucking dancing, so is fucking cooking or whatever. It's like, who cares? Like, why is sports a special word? Like,
Well, it's because the reason, and this is my argument, because this is the things people bring up. It's like, why do you care? And I'm like, I really don't. It's just that, like, I'm not like fucking flipping over my bed, being like, why is League of Legends a fucking sport?
Fucking badminton?
What it brings back to me is, and that's why I used the example of literally and how like people bastardize and misuse that word so much that it doesn't mean what it means anymore. We don't even have a word for that anymore. You know, it's like, and so if anything can be a sport and it doesn't matter, then why have a category for it at all? And why even have the word sport? You know, like that's kind of where I'm coming from. It's the same thing with exclusives, where it's like this is an exclusive on this console, except for it's also on PC. Except for you can also play on your iPhone. Like, well, it's not an exclusive, then, is it?
The question is, why does it matter? When does that word actually mean anything and mean the difference between anything? Like when it comes down to it, like the only thing I can think of is, does it belong on ESPN? Because that's the only time the word sports means anything, and all these things are on ESPN.
Well, that's the but remember, ES is entertainment and sports. So it's not, that channel's not just meant for sports. That's why they've had the spelling bee forever. That's why they show poker, you know, and all these kinds of things. So you have to understand that it's not, ESPN is not just sports programming. It's supposed to be something that's entertaining. That's why they show esports too, because they're smart enough to know that this is going to make them a lot of money in the future. And I think that that's a very intelligent thing. Just like the spelling bee for some reason makes them a lot of money, and they just keep doing it. So
it's because every year people can't believe there's actually a real spelling bee that happens.
It's true. There's definitely something about it.
It's one of those things where I think that last year was the first time it really dawned on me that there is a national spelling bee. It's not just something that people use as a trope in movies to make you laugh and to make fun of nerds.
B, you can't spell Dawn.
I can't spell anything. You've seen my motion graphic stuff. And B, Colin watches the spelling bee every year and knows the people that are in it.
Yeah, I
like
do. I
knows that, like profiles them. Like you got stat sheets on these people, and you know who's gonna do what.
Kids,
and like
some of the kids are the same every year.
Kid's bad with U's,
but it's also the judges are always
don't give him a W.
The guy that reads the words on the script spelling bee is the same guy every year. I know that motherfucker.
What the fuck else is he gonna do?
I don't know. I don't know.
What do you do for a living? Well, I'm a school teacher, but my claim to fame is that I read the words on the National Spelling Bee on ESPN. Like, awesome. Spelling
Bee is good drama, and that's the other thing that people have kind of, I think, mixed up sports and drama in terms of like, well, the line on the graph is sports and drama go up. This is why the NFL is so successful, because the NFL, there's few games, there's only 16 games a year plus playoffs. And every game matters, and there's a week's worth of drama in between every game. This guy's hurt. This guy said this. NFL has just
made dogs fight.
The Michael Vick made dogs fight, and he did.
His people did.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to like throw accusations out there, although he totally fucking messed up and was complicit in that whole thing. The point is that the NFL has mastered the fusion of entertainment and sports and drama and sports in such a way that when someone sees like, well, I was reading with Dota, like there's some shakeups post the $6 million winning where these Dota teams are getting broken up, and this is the first time that they've really dealt with this kind of thing where it's like people are getting dropped and released into the wild, basically, like it happens in football every day. And I'm like, yeah, but let's not conflate also drama and entertainment with sport either. All of these things mean different things, and you can fuse these words together into getting specific permutations that give you something like the NFL, which is so unique compared to all the other sports leagues and is so powerful and awesome. I mean, an NFL is just awesome, but it doesn't necessarily mean that just because you have drama with an activity means that it's a sport either. So I guess that's what I'm saying is like these words just need to mean something. That's all.
Do you think
that's all I want is just words that otherwise why the fuck do we talk?
That's true. Isn't it as a kind of non sequitur? Well, kind of is. Isn't it weird that we have something like the National Spelling Bee? Like we don't choose that as an American pastime. Like we have the National Spelling Bee, but for every one National Spelling Bee, we have like 500 other sports that don't glorify intellect necessarily. Not necessarily. Like I still think that it takes a fair amount of mental dexterity to play any sport at that level. You have to be pretty, if not book smart enough to understand the physics and incorporate those into your mechanics, right? But it's a little weird and a little telling that we don't glorify more activities like the spelling bee. Kind of sucks. I wish there were more spelling bees. I wish there was stuff like
I think there are, but nobody watches them.
Nobody watches them. They don't get the ratings.
They're on ESPN 5.
There's a 5?
I would not be surprised.
I don't know.
How
I
many
don't
are
watch
there?
ESPN.
There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of ESPNs. ESPN Classic, ESPN News, ESPN 1 and 2.
Classic's my favorite. It's where they all wear the blazers and it's like that 70s tinge to it, you know? It's like the 80s, like, welcome to the 1982 Open. And you're like, what the fuck? What? Everyone that has beautiful hair, horrible teeth, they all look like pedophiles.
And on that note, we'll end this episode of Game Over Greggy Show. Thank you for joining us today. Episode 90 is episode 90 of the Game Over Greggy Show. This table, of which I'm not going to talk too much about. Remember that you can find us on YouTube for free if you have patience. Otherwise, you can support us at patreon.com/kindafunny in order to get things early, whether it's the video or the audio or both. We appreciate you very much. Greg will be back to do a more orderly Game Over Greggy Show, I assume, next week. But we appreciate you and thank you for your time. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.